Okay, so I'm Shetan Noir. I run here on this front.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
I am from Michigan, and I have 2 books out right now. Lake Monsters and I, Creatures of the Great Lakes, which is available on my table. And then next month I have Mothman and Odd Creatures of the Great Lakes, or of the Midwest, coming out. So I run on Facebook. I have 2 groups. I have the Great Lakes Center for Unexplained Events and Phenomenon, which anybody's, can join. And then I have the Michigan chapter of the North American Dogman Project, which focuses mostly on Michigan area dogman sightings and investigations. And then I just started a new group for people who work with any type of canine, which is a dog, obviously, but anybody who does tracking or stuff like that in their investigations, and wants a group to work with, that is more cryptological and paranormal based for getting information. So those are my groups that I run. And my presentation today is Cryptozoology of the Great Lakes. Now, almost every state in North America has reports of Bigfoot and Dogman. So those are on each of the state slides, but I'm going to focus more on the unique, weird little cryptids that pop up every once in a while. People are like, "Hey, I saw this thing, and what was it?" So,
I've never heard of Dogman.
Okay, well, the Dogman is North America's other upright bipedal apex predator. So obviously, Bigfoot is a huge primate that has popped up, here and there, sightings of it, looking very ape-like. While the Dogman is an upright walking dog. And there's lots of speculation into whether it's an actual physical creature, if it's a paranormal entity that is just popping up here and there, if it's interdimensional. So there's lots of speculation until somebody actually catches one, which hello, we haven't got Bigfoot yet. So
right.
Dogman's a lot more sneaky with his behavior. He's more elusive, unless he's hunting you, and then he's not so elusive. The chances of somebody actually catching one and getting the physical proof of it is, at this point in time, I would say it's going to be a hard one to do. But then again, people say moose are real, and I've never seen one, a real one. Even at zoos, it's like, where's the moose? Where's the moose? I don't see any moose in this enclosure. It's a fake creature. It's like a unicorn. So with that, I will shut the door because there's lots of noise. I'll just blocks a little bit. So let me get to my first slide, which will be Michigan, because that's my home base. So in Michigan we have, obviously we have the Dogman, we have Bigfoot, but some of the lesser known ones, the Nain Rouge, which Detroit is famous for. It's a little, I don't want to say troll-like creature, because knowing my dog, next time I'm in Detroit, he'll destroy my car. The proper term is a lutin, which comes from French settlers, and it refers to a gnome or troll-like creature, very mischievous. And some historians believe that the Nain Rouge followed French settlers over here and then became established in the Detroit area, while other people believe that he was already here and he was actually a nature spirit that was very, very irate when the French settlers came from Quebec and settled in what was then New France and became Detroit. Actually, I have a slide for Nain Rouge. I just remembered. Okay, So the curse of the name Rouge begins when Detroit's founder, Antoinette de la Mothe Cadillac, was walking on the banks of the Detroit River after he had the fort built, and he had been warned before he came across the Great Lakes into the Detroit area, which was all wilderness at the time. When he was in Quebec, the night that he was leaving, there was a big celebration, and a gypsy fortune teller had been invited in to tell everybody's fortunes. Well, everybody decided they would fool her, and they switched seats and everything. And when she got to Cadillac, she proceeded to tell him to beware the name Rouge. And she, described his appearance and told him, do not disturb or annoy or, irritate this creature because he can bring great doom. And so what does Cadillac do as he's out one day strolling the banks of the Detroit River? The name Rouge pops out in front of him on the path, and he engages in a duel. His walking stick versus a stick that the name Rouge has. He effortlessly defeats the name Rouge and beats him with the stick, and the name Rouge decides to curse Detroit for the rest of its history. So a lot of when Fort Wayne, Detroit was burnt to the ground, they landed on the name Rouge. When certain battles, like in Reason River, were fought, supposedly the captain of the fort saw the name Rouge running along the embankments, laughing at him, and he knew that they were pretty much screwed, so he gave up and they were defeated. Like the blackouts in Detroit have been blamed on the name Rouge. The last major sighting was in the 1970s, and some electrical workers were up on a telephone pole, and one of the guys looked up and saw this creature climbing up, or what they thought was a child climbing up the telephone pole underneath the guy who was already up there, and he's like, get down from there, and which startled the other guy, and he looks down and hears this, they're child size, but they have really bad teeth, and they're all red, and they look like they're dressed in rags, and they're creepy looking. Imagine, the creature Leprechaun from the Leprechaun movies, but in red and with, more feral looking. And so they yelled at it to get down, and so it scurried back down the pole and jumped down and kind of leered at them for a few minutes, and then it rambled off down the street. The very next day, the huge ice storm hits and blacks out Detroit for several days. So that was the last known major sighting of him. Now every year in Detroit, we have a wonderful tradition where we have on the third Sunday in March, we have a parade where we celebrate the name Rouge, and we do a march with him, and then we throw him in a car and drive him to Toledo.
Oh, great. Thanks, guys.
It's a tradition.
So people are looking for this creature, but you really don't want to meet this creature because it's a predetermination of doom.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, because some people say he brings the doom, and other people say that he's warning of it.
Oh, he's warning. Oh, okay.
Whichever the case is, when he shows up,
something
bad shit happens.
Right.
So, it's like, oh, there he is, run, or oh, there he is, run, and get him. So it just depends on what your mindset is, and whether you see him as being the cause of it or being the warning of it.
That's kind of like the Mothman.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's very similar in that respect. So moving on.
Oh,
Because
sorry.
I have
Sorry.
because I have all those states. So the next two I'll talk about is the Beast of Old 127. Lake monsters I'll throw in here and there, and then we had the Lake Leelanau turtle, and we did have reports in the Holly area of Michigan, which is like right over in here, close to where our Michigan Renaissance Festival stuff is, of a chupacabra, and it actually came from a person who was doing repos on cars. And he finally found where this one car was located, and he went to get it, and as he was hooking it up, he kept on hearing things in the surrounding area moving around, and of course he's thinking it's people who are hiding the car, trying to, keep it from being repossessed. And so finally he gets done hooking it up, and he walks around and he sees this creature, which he then describes as a chupacabra, which I'm beginning to think applies to anything that is odd, weird, and hairless.
Yeah.
Probably.
Because a lot of people like mange animals is very, especially wild or feral animals,
Right.
is very, very common, because obviously they're not going to get any veterinary treatment, and that's the only way to actually cure a case of mange. I've seen it in all forms, and the worst forms are when it's, all the hair's
Almost
missing,
hair, yeah.
the skin's leathery, and it's encrusted. Which a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's a disease, chupacabra. No, it's a
It's a
fox,
poor
or
little dog that
it's
needs
a
a
bear
doctor.
with mange, because animals that are, you see the hairy version of them, and then you see a sicker version of them that's hairless, and it's like, oh, that's a totally different animal. So who knows what he saw? He could have, it could have been a wolf or a coyote that had mange. It could have been a very large raccoon, because we get
They're pretty big.
between 30 and 40 pounds is not unheard of,
Right.
Except like in my backyard, I know we've got a 35-pound coon waddling around here and there, because I've seen them eating. So and those standing up, if they stand up on their back legs and they're trying to get something, they can be about 3.5 feet tall. Fully extended, and if you're only getting a brief glimpse of something that is terrifying, first of all your fear element is already on. You're always like, something's out there, and then you're getting a glimpse of something, so your imagination fills in the details of what you might saw. So that was the chupacabra report. Now the beast of Old 127 was really interesting, because I just got this report about 2 months ago, middle of May. I was up in the Houghton Lake area, and a woman came up and she was talking to me and another cryptozoologist, Brian Parsons, and she was telling us about the event had been 15 years prior, and she was following her next door neighbor had a heart attack. So the ambulance had him, and they were going up Old 127. She and the neighbor's wife were in one car, and her husband was following in the truck. So according to her, they get to this one intersection, and this creature that was the size of a camel, had a domed head with no visible neck, was reddish brown with shaggy hair, and had hands like a human and feet like a human, walking on all fours across the road. Now this was, I believe she said it was February, so the ground was frozen, it didn't leave any tracks, but it crossed a two-lane highway, old highway, in front of all of them, and then went off into the woods. So it obviously did not care that it was encountering humans. She went back after they got everything settled in with the neighbor and the wife. Asked her and the husband were coming home. She said, stop, I want to look for tracks. So she's out of the car, or out of the truck, and she's looking on both sides of the roads, down into the ravines, for any tracks, and her husband's yelling at her to get back in the car, and she's like, why? He's like, did it ever occur to you it could still be in the area and it might want to eat us? He's like, and we don't have any guns in the vehicle. So then she got back into the vehicle.
He didn't want to eat you. He would have stopped to eat you.
Yeah,
before.
so it was very interesting report, because Brian Parsons and I are looking at each other and we're like, well, if it wasn't Bigfoot and wasn't Dogman, we're like, we're like, did it have horns? And she's like, no, I didn't see any horns or anything. I'm like, that's good, because that would make it a Wendigo, and nobody wants to deal with Wendigos, which I will cover in my Minnesota file. So we must have talked to her for 45 minutes, and we're making suggestions and showing her every large bipedal or quadruped, cryptid that we could think of in the area, and we couldn't come up with anything that appeased her. So we were like, we don't know what. It goes into my file of unexplained unknowns, and I now call it the Beast of Old 127. So
What year is that?
that is, with Michigan, it's really cool because we can
Right,
go
I know.
and show, because Michigan's the state.
Yeah.
So Houghton Lake is up in
yeah,
this
this
area,
okay,
so
yeah.
Old 127 runs up
Oh, gotcha.
along that.
Okay, all right.
So, so also in this area, right off of Lake Michigan, there was reports of what I call the Lake Leelanau turtle, which is a very interesting report because it was a turtle. Now, let's go back to the Pliocene area when turtles were the size of Volkswagen buses or bigger, depending on what part you were in. And you have to remember at that time where the Great Lakes region is would have been down towards the equator. So everything got bigger down there, and then everything will get back up. So the reports of this turtle is it was purple and yellow. And when it would come into the Bay Area where the people saw it, it came in there primarily for nesting because it did lay a couple of eggs, which they lost. I know. Wonderful thing about cryptid stories. Something always gets the evidence always gets lost. But the most unusual aspect of this cryptid was the fact that it was luminescent. And when it would come swimming in, it was always very noisy. They said it sounded like a herd of cattle was moving through the water because of its flippers.
Well, and it's so big. Because it's
yeah,
so big.
yeah, but they said the area around it and underneath of it was always lit up. So somehow this turtle had luminescence to it, and it was seen on, I think, 3 or 4 occasions by 2 different families. And when they did collect the egg, they decided to take it into town, but as the wagon was going across the bridge, obviously it jarred or bumped, and the person holding the egg dropped it into the water, and they were never able to recover it. Now some people, these reports came in like 1950s-ish and stuff like that. So relatively recent in the historical records of reportings. And some people are questioning, well, maybe it was a submarine or something. The only problem with that is the depth of the water would not support anything that was able to submerge, and because you're talking maybe like 15 feet of water. And a sub needs way more water than that to for the buoyancy and everything like that. So it's a there's historical reports of it, and it's a very unusual cryptid. So it's also in my Lake Monster book that's over on my table. So now we'll move on to Ohio.
All right. Ohio.
Okay, so in Ohio we have the Ohio Grassman, Dogman, the Loveland Frogman, reports of the Snallygaster. There are reports of Mothman along the West Virginia border because he just wouldn't stay in Point Pleasant. The Freedom Township Demon, Bessie, and the Minerva Monster. So the first one up is the Loveland Frogman, which is a very interesting story. So the salesman in 1955 was traveling late at night, and as he was coming down the road, 3 upright walking amphibious frogs crossed the road. Now, he said that they were 3 to 4 foot tall. They had leathery skin and frog-like faces, and at least one of them appeared to be using a wand that was emitting sparks. When his headlights hit them, they kind of, did one of these, shrinking back, and then they proceeded to go across the road and into the woods more. Obviously, he reported to local authorities, and that's how the legend of the local frogman started. Now, that was back in 1955, but in 2016, there is a report of a couple that was out playing the now infamous Pokemon game. Gotta catch them all, gotta catch them all. And as they were out playing this game, they encountered one, and so they were having a real life encounter with, a cryptid creature. So it's shown up, twice in history. Ohio seems to have a lot of interesting amphibious creatures. This being, just one of them. There's also reports of a lizard man, along the Ohio River, that some people describe as like the creature from the Black Lagoon looking. So there's, Ohio has, for not being, like the upper part of Ohio follows like Erie, but for the most part, Ohio is like farmland and mountainous. You've got the hollows and the Hocking Hills and stuff like that. Not a whole lot of like massive lakes. Ponds and stuff here and there, but not gigantic ones like like Michigan and Minnesota has. But they have, they even have reports in the Ohio River area of alligators and crocodiles. And the only reason that they know that they're there is to prevent themselves from freezing completely to death. They will stick their snout, their nostrils up out of the ice. As long as those don't freeze over, they can lower their heartbeats down to, I think it's 1 beat per minute or 5 minutes, and they can go relatively dormant. But imagine how creepy that is to go out ice fishing and you're like, there's snouts sticking out of you.
Well, I live in Indiana, and there was one on the news, northern Indiana. I live in Indianapolis, and there was a 4-foot alligator, and it had been run over on the interstate. Mm-hmm. So you think they're not here, but
unfortunately,
they are.
A lot of people, because it's not illegal,
you get them and turn them loose
to buy alligators as babies, but people think, oh, if I just keep it in a small tank, it's going to stay that way.
Oh no.
It's like, no. Unfortunately, I've seen cases where people who have put turtles in goldfish bowls, because I used to do turtle rescue, and these idiot people would bring in a fish bowl with a turtle almost the same same size, and so then you have to get a chisel and a hammer and you break the damn turtle out and
why would you leave it in there when you saw it was getting too big for the bowl?
Exactly. But people are idiots. So a lot of times in Michigan we have, in the lower part of the state, we have the Cryptozoology alligator sanctuary, and I interviewed them for my Lake Monster book, and they said yes, they get phone calls from every state. Hey, we've got an alligator, crocodile came in, could you come and get it? It's too big for us to take care of. So generally, they said when the alligator reaches 3 to 4 feet, that's when people suddenly realize, oh, I'm out of my league and I can't care for this animal anymore. It's too big for me to even handle, and it's not the cuddly creature that I thought it was going to be.
My nephew's a cop in Detroit, and he said the trend maybe 10 years ago, when all the drug dealers had alligators, he said, every time we go in for a drug bust, we find an alligator in the bathroom.
Oh my God!
Yeah, a lot of people that I know who do, they get hired to go in and like the city will sell the house. And so they'll get hired to go in and
Clean
gut,
it up.
and they said, their rule of thumb is if there's no stairs to the basement, they call law enforcement or any animal control usually, because most cases, there's something in the basement that, that's where the drug dealers would, stab you, shoot you, and
Throw
throw
you
you
down
down to the
there.
basement so you can get back out and something eats you down there.
Yeah.
So they would call, animal control, law enforcement to come in and verify that the basement was clean or, clear and there's nothing down there, because obviously that's where, all the hot water tanks and stuff like that are. So, just for them to be on the safe
Oh,
side.
that's scary.
Yeah, so keep that in mind if you're ever go out house hunting and you're like, oh, why are there no stairs going into the basement? There's a reason. So, we were briefly talking about Mothman earlier. This is a very similar creature called the Freedom Township Demon, which is located in Freedom Township, Ohio. And when I was doing the research for my book that's coming out next month on Mothman and other flying creatures of the Midwest, one of the interesting things that I found was you have a mass sighting or a flap of activity of the West Virginia Point Pleasant Place Mothman. When those sightings end, a creature pops up in nearby Pennsylvania and Butler County that the people were referring to as a gargoyle. And almost all the reports state that it's 7 foot tall, has wings, but it looks like stone. And the coolest report that I got when researching this book, and the person actually talked to me at an event, and then they emailed me their report, was he was driving, it was almost dusk, he was driving home along this rural road, and as he's passing this house, he sees in their front yard what he thinks is the coolest Halloween decoration he's ever seen. These people probably spent, at least $5,000 on this, 7 foot tall statue of a gargoyle. And he's like, man, that's really, really cool. The only thing is he's driving past it, the head turns and it's following him, which freaks him out to begin with. And as he's recovering from that, he sees this motion behind him, and when he's looking in the rearview mirror, there's nothing there. Next morning, he drives back, and the creature's gone. So he believes that he had the sighting. So after these sightings die down in Freedom Township, a similar creature appears and is in that location for about a year and a half, and then those reports die down and start up in the Lake Michigan area of Chicago, which may or may not be hoaxes. I'm just going to put that out there. I think there were a couple of sightings, but then I think people have embellished on it and created, reports and to further whatever. So this Freedom Township demon was spotted by several different people, and always in a wooded area. The Ravenna Arsenal area was a prime habitat for it. Several people saw it in that area, and they would describe it as like a Mothman gargoyle type creature, but I also got at least one report where it was a dragon type creature that they said had a 20-foot wingspan, and to me that puts it more in the snallygaster type category, because obviously we don't have dragons flying around today, otherwise I don't know. And Tegan would ride it. Great. Tegan is my little 7-pound midget, who is the feisty citizen. So Lake Erie is our most shallowest Great Lake. The fantastic part about Lake Erie is the Bessemer Marquette number 3, which was a 360-foot steel freighter, sunk in Lake Erie. has never been found to this day. They don't know the whereabouts of the ship. They don't know where it possibly sank at. So when people ask me why hasn't a lake monster ever been caught, if people can't find a 360-foot steel ship with all of today's technology, what makes you think you can catch a living organic creature that can freely move in the body of water that is hundreds of miles in square feet? Lake Erie has Bessie. All the Great Lakes, there's Bessie, there's Cressy, there's, because they all kind of spin off Nessie from Scotland. But Bessie has been described as a long-necked plesiosaur. And then there's Bessie, and then there's South Bay Bessie, which is, I think, is more of a hoaxed creature. There have been several different reports that I've encountered by legitimate people who believe they saw a lake monster. But as we all know, hoaxers will go to extreme lengths to pull the wool over somebody's eyes. So I do believe that the Bessie plesiosaur, I do think that's actually a possibility, because I have a theory that when people are seeing the plesiosaurs swimming in the water, it's actually a residual haunting, and you're seeing the creature during the last minute of its life before it either dies of a heart attack, stroke, or is killed off by a bigger predator or a group of predators. And so you're seeing, this creature right before it meets its demise. And that's why people are sometimes seeing these, but there's no evidence found of it actually living in the water or being possible to live in the water. Whether it's, because of the temperature of the water, or there's lack of food, or breeding areas or nesting areas. So when people say, oh, there's no plesiosaurs in the Great Lakes, well, not at this time. Not at this time. There isn't any. But considering that the Great Lakes used to be tropical, and then were pushed up to where they are now, and the glaciers, came along and scraped everything out, opened up new waterways, things swam in, waterways closed up, they become landlocked, and then you've got the St. Lawrence River and the Mississippi River that actually they're locked now so that things can't swim up and down them of massive size, like silver carp. I do believe that at one time we did have plesiosaur. We had marine reptiles swimming in the Great Lakes. And I believe what people are seeing is the residual haunting of those creatures. Now, there have been, in all the Great Lakes, there have been reports of giant sturgeons, giant snakes. There's actually a report in the Ohio area where two men went out in a fishing boat and were claiming, oh, we caught this creature, we caught the Lake Erie monster, and come to find out they were carnival workers. And the Indian python that the carnival had as part of its menagerie had gone missing. Well, these idiots took it out and claimed that they caught it. They put it in a wooden box, brought it back, and when the curator of the Natural History Museum showed up, he said, no, this is a rock python. This doesn't live in North America. This is from, overseas. And lo and behold, suddenly those two guys disappear, leaving the rock python behind in a beaten up state. So obviously it didn't live very long, and the carnival left town this very next day. They were trying to make good on a reward that was being offered locally. So Lake Erie, all the Great Lakes have what I call there's 5 different categories that lake monsters fall into. Your plesiosaurs, which to me covers, even though it shouldn't, I should say marine reptiles, but most people will think, oh, you mean like iguanas? No, I'm talking like, plesiosaurs and mosasaurs and stuff like that. Um, you've got your plesiosaurs, your giant snakes, your giant sturgeons, your giant turtles, and then you've got your amalgamations, which are more of the Native American legends, like Inabishu from Lake Superior.
Those giant sturgeons are lovely. You ever see one? Oh my god. I only see videos. I haven't seen one in real.
Well, the thing you have to remember is a sturgeon of 6 foot or longer, that's at least a 75-year-old fish who's been living in the lakes for a long, long time. And it's actually, people like the lake sturgeons, you should leave them intact, because any of the silver carp that get into the Great Lakes, guess what's going to eat them?
Yeah.
Because our lake sturgeons are the biggest predator in the Great Lakes. The silver carp, the Asian carps get into the Great Lakes, it's done for, because they eat all the vegetation, which then leaves, like, the natural species, their fish fry, the babies, have no vegetation to hide in, so they are just, gobbled up by everything. So they actually, it's actually beneficial to have, those big predators in the water to eat the introduced species. Okay, so the Minerva monster is actually kind of a Bigfoot creature. A little bit different than the Ohio grassman. Ohio grassman is a very aggressive species of Bigfoot that's very attracted to females, human females, probably for mating purposes. But the Ohio grassman is more of a wheat in color. He blends in really, really good with the cornfields and the wheat fields. And especially during the fall when everything takes on that wheaten color, he blends in really, really good. But the Minerva monster was first seen in the 1970s by the Clay family. Now they reported that this 7-foot tall, 300-pound creature was hairy. It was bipedal, so usually that falls right under Bigfoot. But they had been seeing this creature around their home a lot. And to the point where when they were in the home, the house was getting pelted with rocks. So they called the sheriff comes out and investigates. They do find evidence of tracks, and there's rocks being thrown. And so this goes on for a period of time. And then the last time they see the creature, there's an adult with a smaller creature with it. So I'm sure people have done more research into it. So usually when something like that's happened, you've moved into their territory and they're trying to defend it. Or it's like a migratory pattern, and the house might have been vacant for a while, and they were used to coming into this area for whatever food, if there's berries or good natural occurring fruits, apples, stuff like that, in the area, and suddenly there's humans. Well, primates see humans as not only a threat, but we are like a major competition for the food sources, with produce, fruits, vegetation, deer, fish, we are their competition for those resources. So were they acting territorial and defensively? They could have been, and they're just trying to defend their habitat because it's, that was theirs first, and then we move in and we're like, hey, we're humans, we take over, and the wildlife's like, no, we will bring you. Call in the hornets. Yeah. The Charles Mills Lake Monster. Once again, we've got a humanoid creature, but this one is different. Even though he's 7 feet tall, the teenagers who encountered him in 1959 claimed that this creature had no arms, but had glowing green eyes and webbed feet. Obviously, to make it easier for swimming. They did encounter it, next to a lake. and therefore we have the Charles Mills lake monster. Another interesting little cryptid that, pops up when you're looking state by state for, what lives there. The Crossrook monster. The legend says it started over 200 years ago. This is another one of those amphibious creatures that is like, where the hell did this thing come from? Two young boys were playing on the banks of a stream when they encountered a tall snake with arms. Now, there is a salamander lizard type creature that lives in Madagascar that's called the long-tailed salamander. And it's got a tail that's 3 times the length of its body. So it, in nature, in the fossil records, there is, a smaller version of this creature. But it grabbed a boy, dragged him 100 yards into a tree with a diameter of 24 feet. Now, that's a pretty big tree. I don't know, that's a pretty old tree. So this must have been like something of the paranormal nature. They say that the creature stood 14 to 16 feet tall, but when it was down on all fours, it was, including the length of its tail, it was 40 feet long, and it was 16 inches in diameter, which would be about that big. Which again, if you were to scale up this, this salamander lizard type creature that's in Madagascar that has long tail, if you were to scale it up, that would be probably what the proportions would even out to. But once again, in Ohio, we have weird amphibious creatures that are, making their presence known. Okay, Pennsylvania. We have Bigfoot, we have the Chicora gargoyle, which is also the Butler County gargoyle. We have the Dogman, Thunderbird, and Snallygaster. So, I already talked about the Butler County gargoyle. So I will talk about Snallygaster, which is a really interesting story. So, back in the Prohibition era, when moonshiners would go out to the woods to make their brews, they had to come up with a way of keeping local town people who were snoopy and law enforcement out of the woods. So, what better way than to fake somebody's death and blame it on a creature? So they came up with the Snallygaster. To the point where they actually got a couple of reporters to write up a story about it. So to explain away the booms and sounds that were coming from the stills, and the smoke, and sometimes explosions and fires, because obviously they're using fire to heat up the alcohol process and purify it. They came up with the story of the Snallygaster, which was this dragon type creature that lived in the mountains and was a predator of human beings, to the point where it would, if it could catch you, it would take you up on top of the mountain, throw you down, kill you, and then eat what it wanted of you. So this story went along for a long time. Now, I could almost laughingly, put it off that, this creature was, a hoax and made up. The only problem is there's actually a Native American legend about the Snallygaster, and a dog-man-like creature that's its enemy that fights it on behalf of the Native Americans. So, but they don't call it, I don't have my book with me, so I can't tell you the exact name of that creature. They don't call it a dogman, but it's an upright walking canine. Dogman. And the interesting thing is, in modern day research and reports, dogman is seen as the more aggressive, more predator type creature. Bigfoot seen as, kinder, gentler, whatever. But in this case, the dogman was actually stepping forward on behalf of the Native American people to battle this rude creature. and was actually able to hold his own against this creature. So think Rodan versus Godzilla, you know.
Yeah.
You know, Godzilla being the one who, you know, is land-based and or can swim in the water, and Rodan is the one who can swim or fly in problems. So then we move on to Indiana. You're not going to, so I'm sure you've heard of some of these.
A few, but mud mermaids sound really cool.
Okay, so yeah, we've got the mud mermaids. The wild one are basically Bigfoot, just a little bit more. They're probably genetically a little bit differently because they appear more like a wild human, but they're a Bigfoot size. Then you've got Mishikimbibe, which is a serpentine lake monster. The beast of Busco is a gigantic snapping turtle. We've got the green clawed monster, the mill race monster, pudgewudgies, and then the rest, dogman, Bigfoot, and ropens are what the modern day term for pterodactyls is. Okay. Okay, so the mud mermaids are, they show up in the Ohio River area. And what people described seeing were these 5 foot long creatures that were yellowish in color, but instead, like everybody, you know, when you say mermaids, you know, sees these voluptuous half woman, half fish creatures with this long, luxurious hair, which anybody who's gone swimming realizes that your hair does not stay like that, which is probably why they, you know, show mermaids brushing their hair all the time. They didn't have any hair, but they did have ears like a dog, like a Doberman or a German Shepherd. And their hands were not like human hands; they were webbed with really sharp claws. So my idea on this is, you can say, oh, look at the fish, and you're like, but what kind of fish is it? Because there are thousands of different species of fish. If we're talking about a humanoid creature or a scalenoid creature that is both human and fish, well, look at how many different fish species there are. Not just with, like, you know, goldfish, trout, you know, salmon, stuff like that, but even going up bigger, sharks. You know, you've got so many different variations and possibilities that, you know, could be present in the genetic makeup. So, do all mermaids look like the Little Mermaid? No. You know, some are pretty scary, some are pretty, you know, you wouldn't want to, you know, meet them. I don't think you'd want to meet a mermaid anyways, because they usually drown humans. That's their, you know, their thought is, you know, drown the human, and, you know, we have no resources. So that's the report on the mud mermaids. Okay, the Mishikanabi. So this creature, first report comes in August of 1838 from Lake Manitou, which Manitou is actually a Native American word, and Manitou refers to the spirit that's in everything. So everything's a Manitou. The trees are Manitou, the grass, that bird, that, you know, human being, the clouds up above, the sun in the sky, the moon at night, the creatures, you know, that, you know, roam the land. Everything is Manitou. It has, you know, the Great Spirit in it. But this creature was, they claimed it was 60 feet long and had a cow-like head. It was a dingy color, which I'm assuming means like a grayish, brownish color, but had yellow spots, which is pretty interesting, you know. Most predators, if there's a bright color involved with it, like yellow, red, bright blue, that's usually a warning that it's poisonous to everything else in its surrounding. I am poisonous, look at my bright, you know, colors, you know, consume me and die, you know. The Potawatomi tribe are the ones who named it, and they actually warned the settlers when they first moved into the area not to have anything to do with that lake because of this creature. And I believe once some of them got up the courage, they were finding gigantic, like catfish in the lake, which a series of those, swimming together could, but the description of the cowboy head that, kind of throws that, there's a little weirdness there, so who knows? The beast of Briscoe, Oscar the giant turtle, who was first spotted by farmers near, do you know the name of this town? Okay, Churubusco in Indiana in 1849. They made attempts to catch Oscar. Apparently he was the size of like a Volkswagen Bug. He was a huge turtle. They were never able to successfully drain the pond completely dry. And the fact that there was no fencing or perimeter up, he could come and go as he pleased. But he became like the local monster legend, which I love it when towns do that. They, Mothman, has Pleasant Place, West Virginia. I love it. Flatwood Monster, is has its own little, Braxton County thing. So I love it when a town actually celebrates their cryptid history and makes something of it, because it's like, oh yes. So they actually have a festival every year in Churubusco, celebrating Oscar the giant turtle. And I haven't been there yet, but supposedly they have like a giant turtle statue, and they do all kinds of things. So someday.
Road trip.
Someday. The green clawed monster. So this one I actually saw on a couple of different TV shows, which kind of perked my interest to investigate it further. And this comes from the area of the Ohio River in Evansville, Indiana, which is on the west side of the state.
Bottom west.
Yeah, because that's where I got little Tegan from. So these women were swimming in the Ohio River. Their kids are playing up on the bank.
Never swim in the Ohio River.
Well, apparently, I guess they were on inner tubes, and one of the ladies was pulled underwater. Or she's being pulled out into the deeper part of the water, and they were trying to pull her back. The woman with her and the kids were trying to pull her back in, and then she got dragged under the water several times. And when they were finally able to get her out, they noticed that she had claw marks on her leg. And so when she went in for medical attention, they were finding debris in the cuts, and she had it sent to a lab to evaluate it, and they said it was actually clay from the lake's bottom, or the river's bottom. So my theory behind that is whatever grabbed her leg had, kind of done one of these coming up the riverbank, observed them, and then swam out to try to grab her and pull her down. This is associated with a Men in Black story, or a government cover-up story, where later that evening she has military personnel show up at her house, and they're like, never talk about this incident. So whether that's true or not, this is the green clawed monster does have different, have some reports to it. It could have been one of the lizard men creature that, which are associated with the Ohio River.
Right.
The mill race monster. This is a Bigfoot that I think spends a lot of time in the swamps, kind of like the swamp ape. And I think because they described him as a large, green, slimy, haired creature. So I'm thinking that this is a Bigfoot who has become used to swampy areas and has algae and stuff like that growing on its fur, which you would think, no creature will let that happen. Actually, in the jungles of South America, the sloths, each sloth is its own biosphere because they are a living creature, but they have other organisms and other living creatures living in their fur, like algae and moths and stuff like that. And they are a whole ecosystem, each one of them on their own. So this creature, green slimy hairy, maybe he was used to being in the swamps and used to this stuff on his fur and stuff like that. Now, there's 2 reports, one where 4 women were sitting in a car eating their food, decided to go to the park to enjoy their food, and this creature comes up and attacks the car. They flee the scene and go tell police officers. While they're in the process of doing that, 2 other people have an encounter with the creature, also contact the police. So then the park's cordoned off and local law enforcement's going through looking for this creature. Search parties were never able to catch the creature, but there was evidence left because of the scratch marks and dents left on witnesses' cars. It could have been a real creature, or it could have been some local teenager deciding to be a jerk, because they didn't have any sightings before that, and they didn't have any afterwards. But because of the police presence that came to investigate it, it probably gave it, if it was a hoaxer, it probably gave them enough of a scare to never try it again, because these guys, and local militia showed up too, with guns. So they were ready to shoot and kill and no questions asked. Which should be enough to deter anybody from wanting to go out and be a hoaxer. The pudge-wudgies, I've actually encountered reports of pudge-wudgies all over the country. Anywhere that Native Americans have been, and anywhere where there's forested areas, where everybody will walk on a trail and stuff like that, but I don't advise people going off trail, because your chances for accidents and mishaps are way much more. The pudge-wudgies are these little 3-foot tall hominids. Most people think that they're peaceful, they're just tricksters, but the opinion of that changes from location, because out on the East Coast area, the pudge-wudgies have actually approached people, and they're like, come with us. And the people are, for whatever reason, they get a weird vibe, and they're like, no. And the theory is if you go with them, then they keep you. Kind of like,
I found it, it's mine.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing about this is most of the reports that I've come across where if the person's walking with the dog will pick up on them and start growling at them, but won't approach them. So that's always a good cue, to follow. If your pet doesn't want anything to do with the creature, then by all means do not try to befriend it and, sure, I'll follow you into the light. No, don't do that. Don't do that, because then your dog doesn't have an owner anymore. You're something's pet.
Right.
Who knows, they might ride humans around with their own. Okay, so now we're moving on to Illinois, which has, Illinois and Wisconsin has some of the coolest, weirdest shit that, you could find. So the Enfield horror, I didn't name it, but in 1940s, a simian-like creature, which is monkey-like, was seen near Mount Vernon. In the 1970s, the creature was again seen by several witnesses, including a small boy and his neighbors. But this time, the creature had 3 legs and eyes that were as bright as a flashlight. In all accounts, the creature kept on trying to enter people's homes and would bang against the doors, until finally giving up and moving on. So, other than it being simian-like, a small monkey-type creature, there's really no other descriptions. But I've come across and I've heard different reports from all over the country of small monkey-like creatures that are supernatural and paranormal, and cause problems, and they're you know, everything from double monkeys to you know, anything in between. The Lake Michigan Mothman, this one I have a hard time with, just because when I was doing research into it, all the reports that were available on the internet, because there were like none published in books at this point, were coming from two sources. But then all the different MUFON and cryptid researchers that I was talking to were like, don't pursue it. They're like, you don't want that in your book. And I'm like, well, but it's part of, you know, modern culture, and it is, you know, popping up in cryptozoology, you know, so I am going to reference it. The theory is that there may have been a couple of original creature sightings, and that people had, but then those reports were taken and blown out of proportion, and then faked reports were added to it to substantiate the research that some individuals were doing into these creatures. Okay. So it's, there could have been something there, but at the same time, it could just be somebody out, you know, pulling the hoax. I mean, there's, if you've ever gone into any of the kite festivals or anything like that, there are some very elaborate, you know, flying kites out there that are just amazing. I mean, there's some that look like they're gigantic octopuses flying in the sky. So if they can get something with that much articulation, obviously somebody could make something, you know, that can fly, that, you know, could give off the appearance of a flying cryptid of, you know, of 6 feet or taller. Giant bird attacks. The most well known was the giant bird flap of the 1970s, where 2 large birds were seen flying near Lawndale, Illinois, and a 10-year-old boy, I believe he was like 85 pounds. Does that sound right for a 10-year-old boy? One of the birds picked him up and was able to carry him 30 feet before the mom and neighbors were able to throw things at the bird and get him to drop the boy. These 2 birds are then seen all over Kickapoo Creek area and Lawndale, Illinois, which everybody thinks Chicago is like takes up the whole state of Illinois, and Chicago is actually just the northeast corner along Lake Michigan. The rest of it is farmlands and rock formations and valleys and really cool hiking trails with lots of access to water and you know, hiding spots for anything. So the birds were there. It was a flap of about 20 days, and then the reports died down, and suddenly nobody, you know, was seeing these. And the reports were picked up and carried by different newspapers in the area, which added to the elaboration of the event. You know, making it more entertainment than it, you know, probably was for the people involved. So in Wisconsin, we have the Beast of Bray Road, which is, in my opinion, a dogman creature. The hodag. We have lake monsters. We have thunderbirds, Bigfoot. We have Peppy, who is actually Wisconsin-Minnesota border because they share the lake that it lives in. And then there's a report of a flying lizard man.
Oh my goodness.
Lake monsters. Wisconsin, to me, is a great state, but it also falls under my P.T. Barnum file, because the people of rural Wisconsin in the early, you know, days, the 1920s and before, figured out real quick that if you wanted to get tourists to your town, the fastest way to do it was to claim you had a lake monster. So, starting in March, somebody would be out fishing, and oh, I saw this creature swimming in such and such lake. And the town would be, oh my God, what are we gonna do? The newspaper reports would pick it up. And it would go nationwide, and suddenly everybody's coming to this town to try to spot or catch the lake monster. And then 2 months later, about 50 miles down the road, near the next big lake, that town, or towns nearby that lake, whichever lake it might have been, would report seeing a similar creature, but it had changed a little bit in color, maybe because of the season, animals go through color changes and stuff like that. So they would have their own lake monster, and then it would reflect to this town. This would go on until, it became wintertime and nobody wanted to travel in the wintertime, and then it would pick up the next spring. So the ones that I've focused on that are landlocked lakes, Lake Winnebago has a monster that's described as a giant sturgeon. They call him Winnie. They have different reports of them. The Devil's Lake has two creatures. One is an octopus and one is a plesiosaur. Now the reason I put more stock into this is because these come from Native American legends. Now I've actually hiked around Devil's Lake, and it's, not Devil's Lake, Rock Mills Lake. Rock Mills Lake has a long reptilian-like serpent. Supposedly, at the bottom of Rock Mill Lake is a stone pyramid, which was left by early Native Americans. And what a lot of people don't realize is, a lot of people think that the Native Americans started in the south, like the Aztecs, and came north. No, they came across the land bridges and then worked their way down. Atlantans were in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area, and then they were the tribe that moved down to where the Aztecs are now and settled, because obviously they were tired of dealing with white snow in winter. Just wasn't fun anymore after, you freeze your butt off.
Too many people died, so
Yeah.
they had to move.
The Beast of Bray Road is, like I said, I think it's a dogman-like creature. Some people claim it's a werewolf. To me, the distinction between dogman and werewolf is dogman is always in dogman form. A werewolf is a shape changer. It goes from human form to an upright canine.
Right.
The first reports were received by animal control, and then Linda Godfrey became the researcher who has invested the most time into researching these reports. It's a bipedal, hairy, dog-faced creature standing 7 to 9 feet tall, and it is an apex predator. Okay, the hodag. Oh, that is the wrong picture for that. That's actually the flatwood monster. So the hodag is a marvelous host creature from the city of Rylander. They turned it into their mascot. The town has claimed it as their own. The guy who created it, Eugene Shepard, was actually the mayor. This was back in like 1800s. He exhibited it at local county fairs, and it was actually a creature that was parts of different creatures. And he was able to talk his son into getting inside the creature and manipulating it. Now, think of this, and this creature is like not exactly well preserved. So it's stinking, it's rotting. Obviously they came up with two versions of it. But the creature, and I have to have the picture in here somewhere. It's a weird badger type looking thing with spikes sticking out of it, and it's green, and they have statues of it all over the town of Rylander. It's wonderful. I was there last fall and got pictures of everything, and it was so much fun. The flying lizard man, this is a report from Linda Godfrey, was encountered by a man and his older son while they were driving down a road in a truck. The creature tried attacking their truck and then flew off. Both men were
sick for days afterwards. So obviously the stress and whatever vibe it gave off of was enough to make them physically ill. Described as a flying green creature with leathery skin. Minnesota. So we've got Bigfoot, Dogman, Pudgewudgies, Peppy, and Wendigo. I'll touch on Peppy because Lake Pippin runs between Minnesota and Wisconsin, and Lake Peppy or Pippin has Peppy, and a lot of well-known cryptozoologists have gone up there to investigate it. It's been documented on different monster shows. Basically what they think it is a plesiosaur type creature. People have seen different stuff swimming against the flow of the water, and people, like there's been people water skiing who have, encountered things, gotten bumped by, something underneath the water, and people who've gone diving or scuba diving say they feel something swimming around them. It could be giant, lake sturgeons, it could be, giant fish of some type, but, there is a report of a lake monster in that. So my final creature of the day is the Wendigo. So the Wendigo is one of the few cryptids I will not go out and investigate under any circumstances. For one, the curse of the Wendigo is an all-consuming hunger that often leads to cannibalism. They will eat anything and everything they can get in their mouths, including their own lips and fingers if no food is available. We're talking roadkill, we're talking human beings, we're talking anything they can catch. They are a human who becomes possessed by a very evil nature spirit. And that's the best way I can describe the process. Often their appearance alters. When you encounter them in the wild, they are usually wearing the skins, furs, horns of whatever they've killed. And a lot of times it's depictions that Native Americans have given and people who have encountered them and survived have given. They're wearing a deer head with antlers or an elk head. There have been accounts where in modern day society people have encountered the Wendigo. There was a report of a bus full of people, and for whatever reason this guy attacked and killed another passenger and started eating him in front of the other passengers. This is claimed to be a Wendigo. There's another report of I believe he was I think it was Alaska. Swift, the gentleman's name was Swift Runner, and in the spring he came back into town claiming that his whole family had succumbed to sickness and everybody had died. And those who didn't die starved to death because everybody was too weak to go out and make food. The only problem was Swift Runner came back into town weighing 100 pounds heavier. So obviously he was finding food at some source when local authorities and people went out through his cabin to collect the remains and help bury what they found were bones, with the marrow sucked out. So that means he not only ate everything on the human skeleton, but the marrow that was actually inside the bones. Obviously cannibalism, so they attributed that to being a Wendigo. So I think that's my last slide. Okay, so if anybody, or if you want to contact me, feel free to come to my booth and talk to me. My email address is shetan@yahoo.com. Feel free to put crypto in the subject box or come talk to me in person at my table. And thank you for coming, and that's a picture of the Mothman.
Well, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
spending the time to just talk to me.
Oh, no problem.